Have you ever been amazed by the history found below the streets of a city? We were when we discovered Mary King's Close in Edinburgh, Scotland.
You're listening to Travel FOMO, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with Wanderlust.
Welcome back to the Travel FOMO podcast. We are crossing into a new country on our gap year journey today. We are taking you to Edinburgh, Scotland. I am Jamin Hilarie, and with me is the person that I drag to as many castles as possible, my wife, Hilarie.
That's me. Oh, I'm so glad to be the one that you drag the castles.
Even though that you kind of put it off and try to think of ways to not have to go, but I still make you go.
I prefer the haunted castles.
See, that's what I picked up later on. I just make up some ghost story about a castle and then you're excited to go.
Oh, brilliant. Oh man, Edinburgh.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, so good. Okay, but let's just get one thing straight. People call it Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yeah.
And Edinburgh.
Correct.
But neither are wrong.
According to you, neither are wrong.
I'm pretty sure I've looked that up multiple times, and neither are wrong, but you prefer Edinburgh, and I prefer Edinburgh.
I prefer to say it the way that I heard every local say it, yes.
Fair.
And you prefer Edinburgh.
I prefer Edinburgh. So I'm just putting that out there in case, well, people will hear us saying it two different ways, so just so they know.
I just pronounce it in a way that I like to call the right way.
This is what I live with, guys. Like, he literally just says, but it's the right way because I do it this way. It's the right way. Oh, man. But let's just say it. It was so cool.
Yeah. My favorite place, I think, on all of our travels.
Are you saying you like it more than Houghton Tower?
That's tough. I feel more connected to Houghton Tower and more like sentimentality, and so if I had to pick a place to be forever or just one spot, I would still probably pick Houghton Tower, but there's just so much at Edinburgh, so much stuff. I mean, we were there 4 nights and we packed a ton into our time there, and I couldn't get enough. I was upset to leave and just started plotting how to get back right away.
Yeah, we both really liked it. We were both like, our minds were blown. And I'd been there before, but I didn't remember it like this. This was just like a whole nother level. We really dug into it. We spent more time there and really got to see a lot. And it was incredible from the moment we arrived. Literally.
Yeah, literally from the time we stepped off the train.
Yeah, from the time we stepped off the train, I remember us literally taking steps out of the train station, and you could hear bagpipes playing, tons of activity, people walking the streets, very trendy. I noticed right away, like it's a very trendy city. It's got edgy vibes, really great views. Like you just immediately start looking around and you're like looking at unbelievable architecture everywhere.
Right. I was just about to say that, from everywhere. And then half the time you're looking across at something on a hill or something, you know, the castle on the hill and all these different things that you're just like, what is that? I've got to go over there and see that. I've got to go here. And it just, I honestly, it being so urban and so trendy kind of surprised me, and I didn't remember that about it. And then it was such a great, like, honestly, from my perspective, I was like, I just want to go to a concert. Like, I suddenly was like, I want to go to a concert. It just seemed like a great place that probably has a great underground music scene. And we ended up meeting some people there that told us that New Year's Eve is a really big deal there. I mean, there was just so much happening. It was amazing right off the bat. I could just tell, like, we're going to love it. Yeah, so many great people and everyone excited to be there, excited that you were there, and like laid back, but sort of an energy at the same time, and was just
such an incredible and such a different place.
Yeah.
Than anywhere that we had been. And I remember even like we had a great Airbnb, and it was in the Grass Market area in the shadow of the castle, like literally in the shadow of the castle.
Yeah.
And I loved that Airbnb.
Yeah. But tell everybody what the Grass Market area is, because I had kind of forgotten by the time it was all said and done. I kind of forgot even what's its historic significance.
Yeah, so it's a big kind of square, like a big open area, and now it's just sort of this open place with like a bunch of restaurants and pubs, and they all kind of set tables up outside, and you can tell that they have like outdoor markets and stuff there. But it was literally a market area where everyone would come and gather, and it's the Grass Market area. And back when public hangings were a thing and executions, they would take place there. So to be a lesson to everyone, like executions were done in public, and so most hangings took place in the Grass Market area. It's sort of steeped in history, and all of the city of Edinburgh, the internal city, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it's all protected.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So everything inside the city walls is protected. So it all looks the same. And so the Grass Market area appears the same as it did back then. It's like cool breweries and pubs and places that you want to hang out and be now. But in the day, it was a wide open market, and there were public executions and things like that. But it looks the same, which I just think is so cool, and was such a cool place to stay, because our Airbnb was on a corner of a building, and out of one set of windows, you could see the castle up on its hill, sort of imposing and dominating the city.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of the other window, you could see the wide open Grass Market sort of court, the square. But I loved staying at that Airbnb. And I remember we got there and we went to buy groceries that first night. And it's funny because we looked up places to buy groceries. I feel like Apple Maps and Google Maps were not being our friend at that point. And we walked a long, long ways, sort of in the dark and sort of away from the part of the city where you want to be. And it was a little dicey, a little sketchy. And we bought groceries. We bought a bunch of groceries because we were going to be there a while. So we've got all these like heavy bags of groceries that were like schlepping back to our place. And I feel like we literally walked past 3 or 4 grocery stores on our way back to the Airbnb that night. But we made it back, and we finally bit the bullet and bought the prawn Pringles.
That's right. This is the place where we did it.
Yes, I was mistaken earlier and thought that we'd done it earlier. You corrected me. It was here, and it was here that we finally bought the prawn Pringles, and we got to try them, and they're as weird as you think that they would be.
It's like shrimp cocktail in a can.
In a potato form.
In a potato form. Yeah, it's really, really funny. But if you like shrimp cocktails, it's not the worst thing in the world. But I don't think that we finished them.
No, we finished them.
Oh, we did. We liked them.
Yeah, I don't know that we liked them, but we finished them. And it was just a really strange thing. And there was like an aftertaste, sort of like a ketchup-y, like cocktail sauce aftertaste to it that just made it really like strange feeling.
Yeah. You know what else we finished was those sugar donuts I found in Tesco. Was it Tesco? Is that the name of the place?
Yes. Yeah, it was Tesco. And they had their own brand sugar donuts that you then chased the rest of.
I loved those. It was just hard for me to find things that I liked. And so I would find something that I liked, and I was like, oh, that's good. And I loved the sugar donuts. Clearly, I wasn't trying to be that healthy anymore. And those sugar donuts it was just the right amount of sweet with a lot of doughy bread. That was good. Yeah. That was good stuff.
We actually did pretty well eating at home while we were in Edinburgh. Well, we only ate out a couple times, and the groceries that we bought there really did last us I mean, for the whole time that we were there, like we ate at home most every meal except for I think twice, but
Yeah.
it and that made it fun too. You sort of feel more like you live there.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like and I mean, we did it to save money, and it is a bit of a chore. So it's not maybe something that you want to do on every vacation, but when you do it, it does make you feel more like a local, because you go to a grocery store and most of the people in the grocery store are people that live there.
Yeah.
And you sort of have more of that feeling of like, I'm making dinner, I'm making lunch, those kinds of things. And I really liked that there, because I do think Edinburgh is a place where I would like to live one day.
Mm-hmm. Well, that apartment was, like you said, was just really great, because not only could you see the castle and you could see the grass market area, but there was this hill, which you may have mentioned, and I didn't catch this, but like there's this little hill, grassy hill, where everyone hung out.
Yeah.
And they would sit out there on like a blanket, or they would like get their acoustic guitar and they'd be like playing music. And so you always had like live music playing. If it wasn't somebody there, it was someone in the pub downstairs playing live music. And you could always hear that. Even if you had the window shut, you could hear the liveliness around you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just all very much like people having a great time. It's like no one had ever been hung in that.
like hundreds of people hadn't been executed.
It's like a bunch of people hadn't been executed in that area. No, but seriously, it had really, really great vibes. It was just really, really nice.
Yeah. It was definitely a cool place to be. I do remember it being like very humid there, though. It was like cold and kind of damp. And I remember we did laundry and we didn't have a dryer, and we had like clothes laying out all over that apartment for like days trying to get that stuff dry.
Yeah. One of our favorite ways to see cities like this is to run them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got in a pretty decent run that day. I mean, what was it? 6-7 miles?
I think it was like 6 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, it was decent. And it was a lot of uphill, because my gosh, from the moment we got off the train, we were like climbing hills the whole time.
Yeah. Still stairs and hills in Edinburgh. That is all that there is.
Oh my gosh, so many. And
somehow
so
you're always going uphill too.
Yeah, man. And honestly, I didn't remember that. And so whenever we started that run that morning, I was like, oh, this is going to be painful. And it was. It was pretty painful. And then that wasn't the only active thing that we did. We also went hiking later on. But the day we went for a run was also Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
So we got up, went for a run, and then we went to church, which is something that we knew that we had wanted to do, especially Easter Sunday. And so you found actually a good church for us to go to that really aligned with our beliefs. And we got there really early, like 30 to 45 minutes early.
Yeah. It definitely, we made a lot better time than we thought we were going to.
Yeah.
It was still early on in our navigating big cities stage. And we weren't taking public transport. We weren't going to pay for an Uber or anything like that. So we were walking, and it was a fair distance. And so we left a little too early. And
it's pretty early.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the only thing more awkward than going to a church for the first time is getting there like 30 or 45 minutes early. So I just remember being like, oh man, like this is going to be painful, because then you're talking about making small talk for like a really long time. But we met really great people.
Yes.
And that was like such a great experience. Everyone, the really funny part is that we were so excited to meet locals, and they all wanted us to meet people that had moved there from Texas.
Right. Yeah. I think everybody that we met, which everyone was really friendly and would come up and talk to us. And then they would ask us where we're from, and we tell them we're from Texas, and they'd be like, oh, right over there. Like, I don't remember their names, but like Jimmy and Sally, they're like they're from Texas.
Don't you want to talk to them?
You should talk to them. It's like, well, sure. I mean, like, I would be glad to meet them, but
yeah.
I kind of want to talk to you because you're not from Texas.
Yeah. Well, this church that you picked was so perfect. It was the Community Church Edinburgh, and it was just such a great experience. Like, they were just so kind. Like, you could just tell these people were so genuine. It was a really friendly congregation. It was relatively small.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was still recovering from COVID. So it was even set up a little differently. So they had things all spread out. There were chairs and tables, kind of like you would imagine like a breakfast setting where there's like these circular tables, and so every family kind of had its own table. And then if you were really concerned about COVID, you could go upstairs and wear a face mask and really social distance a little bit more, which I thought was really thoughtful. It was also really cool because it was an old church.
Yeah, a really old church. I think from like the 1600s.
The building itself, was so old. And I thought that was really cool because that's not really something we get to do as much in America, is go inside a really old church and have a modern service.
Yeah.
And so that was a really fun experience. It is funny too, though, just talking to people, you could tell right away, everyone was like, this is not England. This is Scotland.
Yes.
Can't you tell how different Scotland is? This is so different. You can tell this is not England, right? It's so different. And I just thought that was really funny that everyone was so quick to point that out.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that too, that they really, like, they would bring it up to you.
Yeah.
Like, because they would ask, oh, where all have you been? And we would tell them, like, oh, we just come from England. Like, oh, well, this is definitely not England. It's so different, right?
Yeah.
You would be like, well, yes, it is, but also it's not.
Right. Yeah. But, then the other part of me is like, I don't know, like I think about that in my head and I'm like, it was so similar. Like, it's pretty similar. But then I do remember us getting off the train and being like, wow, this is so different.
It definitely did have a different feel, and you did know what those people were talking about when they would be like, it's so different, right? You'd be like, you know what, it is. Like, it is different. And even though if you're from America and you set it right next to England, you're like, oh, it's the same. But like you said, when you really get into it, it's a lot different.
Yeah. This service was really like a little bit different too, because from what we're used to, there was a woman emceeing on stage. So she's on stage, she's kind of being the MC. And then there was a man that was pastoring everything, but it wasn't really like much of a sermon so much. It was really interactive. They kind of did the whole thing like we do in America, where it's like, hey, we usually have donuts. They had hot cross buns, which is like, oh my gosh, that's like a little unique. And hot tea, which is, a little different. Mostly in America, they just offer coffee and donuts.
Yep.
But it was a really interactive service. Everyone, like different people would get up and share stories about like the hope that they have in Christ, which I thought was really cool, that like so many people were a part of the service and it wasn't just one person up there talking about Christ. It was a bunch of people talking about the impact he's had on their life. And I thought that was really special. And then at the end of the service, and again, I'm just like a little blown away by how interactive the services are in the United Kingdom, because they just are not like that where we've been in America.
I agree. I expected them to be a lot more formal and almost stuffy, and I don't know really where I got that idea, right. But I think I walked into it thinking like, oh, this will be a lot more formal and a lot more measured and
traditional.
Traditional and sort of, and everyone will be more reserved. but it was kind of the opposite. It was a lot more interactive and a lot more creative, I think, than stuff you're used to. And it was really cool to see people expressing their faith that way and living out their faith in a way that I didn't expect, and in a way that's different from what you're used to.
That's right. Yeah. For example, like at the end of this service, they had everyone make flowers. So kind of while there's a very brief sermon happening and while people are giving kind of testimonies, everyone's sitting at their tables and they're making these flowers. And then at the very end, we all put these flowers on a cross, and kind of this cross has just like flowers all over it. And that was just one example of one of the ways that they made it interactive, in addition to all the testimonies and different things that they had going on. I don't know. I just loved that the praise and worship was actually pretty familiar. There were songs that we knew. It was all very approachable, and we actually did end up meeting the guy and his family from Dallas, which was really funny.
Yeah.
It was like, okay. I think he also was getting a lot of people coming up to him saying, there are people here from Texas, you have to meet them.
Right. I feel like if you've ever been part of an organization that's small and is like a lot of like couples, and you come into it as a single person, and then another single person enters, everyone is like, you should talk to so-and-so, you should talk to so-and-so,
Yeah.
you should, and like both people are getting it. And I think that's what was happening to them as well as to us. It was like, you should talk to, and so I think at some point we both just agreed, like, we need to make everyone happy right now.
And make contact.
Like, have a conversation with each other.
Yeah. It's so funny too, because it's not like we speak different languages.
Right.
Like if it was a service where it's like, oh, there's another English speaker over there, it'd be like, oh, let me find them.
Yeah, exactly.
But overall, like, it just felt really good to be with other believers that day for me. Like, it just felt really comforting to be in foreign places and to be around other people that believe like you do, and show that, so.
Yeah, it was a cool Easter, and we got to go have a Sunday roast right after that.
That's right. That was so fun.
Yeah, and it's something I would definitely recommend if you're in the UK. A lot of pubs and restaurants will do a Sunday roast, and so it's more of it's a traditional kind of thing, and it's lunch on a Sunday, and they make a certain number of them, and then kind of once they're out, they're out. So if you're wanting to do a Sunday roast, find a good place, make reservations, and go early enough that you can get it. It's a lunch thing. But we went to a place called Badger and Company.
So cool.
It was definitely cool. Like, had all kinds of crazy cool vibes. Really, really good cocktails. The bartenders were cool. The wait staff was nice, and it was sort of had like a posh, vintage yet modern, sort of chic vibe to it. We sat in like big armchairs, and like which was fun and cool, and it
had a luxury feel to it.
Yeah. So the theme Badger and Company comes from The Wind in the Willows, which I grew up on as a kid. Maybe you did too, but it's the story of Mr. Toad and Toad Hall and Mole and Ratty and Badger. So there's paintings and art and all of that, and the story of The Wind in the Willow is actually kind of cool. The author was just a guy. He worked at a bank, and he had a son.
So is this is the story of the author?
Yeah,
of
how the story came about.
Got it.
So the author of The Wind in the Willows was just a guy that worked at a bank, and he had a son, and his son was born premature and was very small and was partially blind, and actually got the nickname Mouse because he was so small, and got kind of bullied and made fun of a lot in school. But his dad would tell him these bedtime stories every night about Mr. Toad and Badger and Ratty, and And Mr. Toad was this adventurous toad that loved to travel. And they lived in the English countryside. And so he was always wanting to go on some kind of adventure. And his friends would be there to sort of help him out on his adventures or go with him or do things to sort of aid him in getting past himself. And he would tell these stories to his son. And one year he went on holiday, and so he wrote letters to his son, and he wrote a lot of these stories. He would just continue to tell the story through these letters. Eventually, it got published as The Wind in the Willows, and that's where that story came about, how that came from. His son tragically died at Oxford in a train accident, and so when he passed away, the author donated the original copies and all of the rights to the Bodleian Library in Oxford, where we had been.
Wow, we
earlier.
were just there.
Yeah. So it's such a cool story, but this restaurant is themed all through Wind in the Willows. And so it's sort of got this whimsical nature to it, and it's really posh and sleek. It's traditional pub fare, so I had the Sunday roast. It was excellent. I think that you had a meat pie, if I remember right. I think you liked it, right?
Yeah, it was good.
And we tried haggis, which we were graduating to try something a little more daring, which if you don't know what haggis is, it's a type of pudding, not like chocolate pudding, but pudding in that it's a mixture of things, pudding in the English sense of pudding, and it's composed of sheep parts, so like liver, heart, lungs, all of that kind of stuff, some oatmeal and some onions, and it's all put into a sheep's stomach and boiled. And so that's what haggis is. And we tried it. We actually tried it. They have it as an appetizer, and it's fried haggis bites. And it was actually really good. I liked it.
Delicious. Yeah, totally recommend haggis.
Yeah, so I have not had it in the traditional form, but I've had it in that way, and I liked it. I would have it again. So it was good.
Yeah, it was great. It gave me a really long, lovely Easter Sunday nap.
Yeah, you went and took a big old nap that day.
I slept for hours, but it was really fun to eat somewhere that was so special. Because I feel like Easter, we would normally be with friends or family.
Right.
And we couldn't be with either.
Yeah.
But it was fun to at least have an experience that made Easter Sunday lunch feel special still.
Yeah.
So without having to make it ourselves.
Right. Exactly. So Sunday roast. If you're in Edinburgh, hit up Badger and Company for a Sunday roast. We wanted to break in and tell you about something that you need to remember no matter what kind of trip you're on. Water. Being hydrated will help you enjoy the journey no matter what kind of journey it is. But it's so easy to forget. So set a goal for yourself and start early. A couple of glasses of water before you start your day will help you get over that lag and into your experiences. What do you want to share that will make travel better? Contact us and we can promote it here.
The other thing you can do when you're in Edinburgh is with a short train ride, you can go see the coastal city, St. Andrews. And it is just a charming little, I don't even know if you'd call it a city so much as a village. It's like an hour away. You've got the St. Andrews golf course, which is famous.
Yeah.
It's so where the Open happens. It's kind of that's really more your lane than mine, but just happened to have been there a couple times and really get excited about that. They were preparing for the 150th Open Championship while we were there.
Yep,
which was really cool. And then there's a cathedral with cathedral ruins there, which is just really cool. It's like literally on the water, on the ocean. It's so cool. It was a little bit closed, so we didn't really get to walk amongst it, but I've been there before when you can actually just walk among the ruins, and it's a photo op for sure. And those are just a couple of things. Like one of the big things that sticks out for me is St. Andrews University, where Princess William and Kate Middleton met. it's like where like love happens. Royal love. In fact, I was there when Prince William was going to school there. And so that was like, wow, like he could be roaming the streets. Oh my gosh.
Did you see him?
No, but Brooke Wilson. And she went chasing him down, and he was on a bike, so he got away. But
he was on a bike.
Well, she's pretty sure he was on a bike, and that was him. And then she saw him. So
it's just by himself on a bike.
So basically, I saw him. I got really excited when I heard that story because I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, just a block or two away. That's crazy. Oh, man. Good times. But one of the things that we did for the first time there is I had been in conversations with Dr. Paul Hain. Love you, Dr. Hain. If you're listening, his daughter actually goes to St. Andrews University, and he and I had worked together, and all the three of us have really worked at the same company together, and I reached out to him to ask him, like, what should we do while we're there? And he was giving us tips, and he recommended going to the Keys Bar.
Yeah.
Because it's a great local place to go to, and oh my gosh, you walk in and you feel local.
For sure. Yeah.
And we literally met locals.
Yeah. Didn't we meet like the bus driver for like the university's like sports team?
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just chatted with him about like he'd just driven the team back from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I kid you not, his accent was so thick. I just smiled and nodded because I couldn't understand what he was saying. And you were gathering what he was saying, so you were able to actually have a conversation with him. But it could have been a foreign language to me. Like, I could not understand what he was saying. But it was just the accent. It was hilarious. I felt this is so silly, but
it's funny because I feel like we were headed down a sports road, and so I kind of was able to kind of guess where we were going to go anyway.
Yeah.
So you just hope for the best.
You did a good job. I was like, wow, I was impressed.
So we got up the next day and we took a walk down the Royal Mile. And so it runs from the castle down to the royal residence where the royal family stays when they're in Edinburgh. So through the streets and shops, and there's been countless processions from royalty up and down that street, and it's a really fun experience to just walk through. But we were on our way to hike Arthur's Seat.
That's right. Yeah, and it kind of starts right down there at the Queen's residence, down at the bottom of the Royal Mile. And oh my goodness, what a cool experience. I had no idea. Like, we knew it was one of the things to do, quote, but it was really special. I just remember, like, one, the hike was a good workout. Like, it was, it took some effort.
It was a legit hike.
Yeah. And then 2, you get to go see the Queen's residence basically along the way, which is great because it's super convenient. There's actually an urban garden. I don't know if you remember, but there was like a garden right outside the Queen's residence.
I do remember that.
I was walking
through that.
Yeah, it was legit, like tons and tons of vegetation. And it was just really surprising to see that right next to a royal residence.
Yes.
Just like a community garden,
Right. And that was so accessible.
Yeah, for sure. But we hiked up this, it's kind of a mountain. It's more like a big hill. There's this moment in time, like this snapshot I have in my head, where we were just like walking up this hill and we're stopping and, we're out of breath and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember thinking, like, this is the most beautiful day, the most beautiful views. I had no idea we were going to get to feel like we were out in the country like we were, and that you could be in such a cool city and have such great outdoor experiences. It was just it just really stood out to me as a pretty great experience.
Yeah, and to be able to do it on foot. Like, we didn't have to take any transportation to get there.
That's true.
Like, we just walked down and did the hike, and that kind of blew me away too, that you could be that much in nature with just a little bit of effort.
Yeah. Yeah. We also did a lot of things that were really close to where we were staying. Actually like the castle and things like that.
Yeah, we toured the castle. That was pretty awesome. We got to, you get to go inside and go through it. So we didn't sign up for it like a guided tour. We just bought tickets to get access in. And so we walked through the castle, got to see all the stuff there, like the palace and the old throne room and the barracks. They have a lot of stuff on the Scottish army through the years. And they also have like the Scottish crown jewels, and they have the Stone of Destiny, which I was intrigued by, because how can you not be intrigued by something called the Stone of Destiny? But it's this massive stone, and the Scottish royals, so the kings and queens of Scotland, were always, their coronation services always took place with them standing on this stone. And later, like a wooden bench was added, and they would like sit on it. But after England and Scotland became joined, Scotland became part of the United Kingdom, then the British monarchs would also, their coronation services would take place on this stone. So this has gone back hundreds and hundreds of years. Even Queen Elizabeth II, she stood on the stone during her service. At some point in her reign, it was returned to Scotland from London, and so it was brought back to Edinburgh, brought back to the castle. I'd be really interested to see when Charles has his coronation, like, are they going to bring it back? I'm interested to see how that kind of all unfolds, but it's so interesting to see something physical that so many important people have touched, and so much history has interacted with this physical thing. It was just really interesting to see stuff like that. There's tons of stuff like that in the castle. You even got to witness the 1 o'clock gun. So they have a huge cannon that they shoot off at 1 o'clock every day. They have a big ceremony around it. And we got to be up there and watch that. And it's at the top of this hill. So when you're kind of done learning about the history and seeing the castle, you get to look out over the city, and you can see out to the ocean. You can see over to Arthur's Seat, and just everything spread out in front of you all around. And you see why this castle is where it is. It's built on an old volcano, and it's just imposing and dominates the city. And that castle has actually been attacked more than any other place in Britain. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, which there's just so much history there packed into one place. I could just go back every day forever and still learn something new that I would find interesting, I think.
For me, the highlight of the trip to Edinburgh was Mary King's Close. Wow.
Yeah.
I loved that. Oh my goodness. Okay, and for people who don't know what a close is, it is a small, like, little alleyway that was more or less a street, a very tiny alley type of street that dates back to like the 17th century. So you're talking like the 1600s.
Yeah.
And we went on a tour with the city of Edinburgh. They host a tour called The Real Mary King's Close.
Mm-hmm.
Mary King was a famous woman. I don't remember what she's famous for right now.
She was a businesswoman.
Oh, she was a businesswoman. Oh, I love that. I should have remembered that. My gosh, they did such a good job on this tour.
Yeah.
I was floored. It was pretty dramatic, but the story itself is so dramatic. You don't even need like a lot of drama to like creep people out. But they basically did a dramatic retelling of what life was like inside Edinburgh homes around the 17th century.
Mm-hmm.
So back in that day, the homes and all of the buildings in Edinburgh were like up to 16, 17 stories tall, like huge. Like nobody would ever think of that.
Yeah.
That there were actual skyscrapers everywhere back that long ago. But the buildings were so tall, the homes were so tall, and people were living on all these different levels. And the bathroom situation wasn't great. The whole living scenarios were not great, right?
Right.
And so people were like, you know, going to the bathroom in like buckets, basically, in the middle of their home.
Yeah.
And so like the bucket would get full and they would like toss it out the window.
Yep.
Toss it out the window. Oh my gosh. And they had this thing that they would say. What did they say whenever they, this phrase that they would yell whenever they would be like throwing all the piss out the window? What did they say?
They would say Gardy Lou. So they would yell out Gardy Lou.
Gardy Lou.
And they would pause. And if someone below would hear that, then you could yell back, hold your hand. And that would mean like, hey, wait. Let me get by. And that's where the expression, I'll clean it up, poo-faced comes from, because people would go out and they would have too many pints and they would be walking down the street. Someone would yell Gardy Lou, and rather than responding, hold your hand and hurrying out of the way, they, in their state of intoxication, would just look up.
Oh, it's so bad.
And poo-faced.
And they would get the poo on them.
Yeah. So if you have heard that expression, now you know where it comes from.
Oh, it's so bad. But that's just a little bit of it. Because I mean, like, if you think about it, if you live the floor, well, anywhere besides the top floor, you're constantly having human waste being thrown, falling down like rain outside your window, basically. Like, oh man, it's just a lot.
Chocolate rain.
Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. Society had different ways of like, you know, where people lived, and like the wealthiest people lived in the middle because they didn't want to walk all the way up the stairs, but they also didn't want to live at the bottom, because at the bottom is where all of the poo ended up, and it would just like roll down the streets. And if you've been to Edinburgh and you know the Royal Mile that Jamin's talking about earlier, it's this long street that goes down, and you can imagine that like
flows downhill.
Everything goes downhill. And so living at the bottom of that street, honestly, quite frankly, like the Queen's residence doesn't sound like a great place to be, because it was at the bottom of the hill. Oh, that's gross. But this is actually where they got the term, where we all get the term middle class, is they literally were living in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that's kind of like interesting. But the stories they told on this tour were so good. They talked about the Black Plague, which is very dramatic time in history. And it's honestly, it's a little eerie because it's so similar to the COVID-19 pandemic that we've lived through. And I think all of us can really relate to that. The things that we heard, we were just like, that's literally exactly what we've lived through. Like, that's so crazy. In this instance, in Edinburgh, back in the 1600s, there were two plagues actually happening at the same time. So there was pneumonia going around, but then there's also the bubonic plague. I think I'm saying that correctly. And it was transmitted basically by rats, which is like creepy. But basically there'd be like fleas on rats that would bite rats and stuff. And then, and anyway, if you got the virus, you were almost certain to die. Within 3 or 4 days, you were just like, death was upon you. And people would put up white flags outside their front door to let the doctor know that there was someone sick there. So it's basically kind of like notifying your, well, I don't know, what do we do in COVID? We would notify our employer, different people, like, hey, I've been, I've contracted something, like, I'm staying home, like I'm sick. And this was their way of basically letting the doctor know, like, hey, you need to stop by this house too. And it's estimated that like half of the population died, which I didn't even remember that stat till I looked it up recently. Like, that's crazy.
That is an insane thought.
I think there was like 35,000 people that lived in the city at the time. So that's insane. And this city, like we said, it's like 16 stories tall. People are packed in. Nobody ever lived outside the city walls at that point. Most people, wasn't there like a tax?
There was a toll, to get in or to go out. Yeah,
a toll to enter or leave the city. So if you were very poor, you never left the city, maybe your whole life. And that's also just a ton of congestion, just a ton of people on top of people on top of people.
Yeah.
And no space to get out in literally the fresh air and be away from sickness, be away from poo. But yeah, like half of the population died. And when someone did die, they would have to keep their body inside the home. There was nowhere to put the bodies. So they'd have to keep the body inside the home until someone could come through with a cart down the streets, these little closes, these small alleyways, and pick up the bodies and haul bodies off. So you're not talking about like this great funeral that you're having for your loved one. It's like you're letting them be thrown onto a pile of other dead bodies and being carried away forever.
Just taken to a mass grave somewhere.
To a mass grave. Yes, there were tons of mass graves at the time. And there was only one plague doctor that served the entire city at this time. Thousands of people, again, I think 35,000 people is what I was reading. They had only, over the whole course of like the 3 really horrible years, they only had 2 doctors the whole time.
That's so crazy.
1 doctor at a time and only 2 over the course of all of that. I can't imagine being the doctor that had to live through all that. But the doctors, so just these 2 guys, basically, they wore a face mask that looked like the head of, if you look this up on the internet, you'll see like, oh yes, I know, I've seen this mask before, but it's got a really long beak. It looks like a bird.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very pointed and very creepy.
Super creepy.
Super creepy. But there was a reason for that, because it was so long. They were obviously working amongst so much, smells, stench, that they were trying to be able to breathe, I guess. And so they would put a ton of herbs that smelled really good, like lavender and different things, and they would put them inside the beak of this mask. Well, unbeknownst to them, it was actually creating an air filter. So they were kind of wearing a face mask, like we all did during COVID-19.
Yeah.
And it was saving their life. And so you wonder like how these doctors could have, I think one doctor was the main doctor the entire time. And then at the very end, he died and somebody else took over for a little while. That doctor, like, how did he survive all that time? Well, because he's basically wearing a face mask. I think that is terribly fascinating and something we can all relate to. He also carried a cane. And if anyone came too close, he'd hold up the cane. And it was about 3 feet long. And between that and his, the length of his arm, it was about 6 feet, which we would say is social distancing.
Yeah.
And then at one point, when people were diagnosed with the plague, they were actually sent outside the city walls. So, kind of like you had to be quarantined, but there was nowhere to quarantine inside this packed little city. So they would send you outside the city walls, kind of to a quarantine camp, and you would stay there for like 12 weeks.
Wow.
Which is really pretty crazy to think about.
It is. It's amazing how stuff sticks with us. And just thinking about like that, the mask that he wore, and like just the fear that it had to create with all these people dying, and if he's coming into your house, somebody's sick and you could get sick, and if you're sick, he's coming to see you, and he's wearing this really like creepy mask. But I doubt that it was initially creepy. I think it became creepy, and it is just stuck with us for that long, that now when you see those kind of masks and you see them, you know, around Halloween or something like that, you're like, oh, it's so creepy. But it's just this like stuck thing from history, and that just won't let go. That stuff's so interesting.
It represents death.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah. One other thing that I read about, and that they told us about on the tour, but it's so gross, I couldn't decide if I was going to like actually talk about it on the podcast. But like, this is so horrible, but people would get these kind of like, their lymph nodes would get full of like pus. And the doctor would have to come in and like pop it before it popped itself and would become more septic and stuff. He would try to pop it and then bandage everything up. But after popping it, he would try to seal the skin back up, and he did that by burning the skin closed. Oh my goodness. Like, as if people aren't in enough pain already.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, and this is all happening so fast too. Like, I can only imagine, like, you get sick one day, you put out the flag the next day, you have 3 or 4 days to live. Like, by the time the doctor sees you, like, what can he even do for you? And then you're being burned. Like, and this is happening to people of all ages, like even kids. Like, it was pretty crazy. It's like really, really, and they really set the tone for all of that, because when you go on this tour, they take you down under the city streets. That's the other thing that I haven't even really like expanded on, is that all of this tour is happening underground at the bottom layers of the city, which at one point the city was kind of just torn down on one level and kind of leveled off, and they created new streets over the old ones, which is crazy to think about. New buildings, new streets. They just kind of just covered it all, probably because it was so gross. And they're like, we're just gonna cover this all up. But on this tour, they take you down into all of these alleyways that go several stories down, and it's pretty crazy. It's definitely worth the tour.
Yeah, it was fascinating to see those old homes the way they used to be, and those old houses. Remember, like, they took us by one, and you couldn't go in, but you could look in, and you saw like they had like green wallpaper up, and it was just such an interesting tour to take.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we did that. That's
probably one of the most haunted cities in the world, do you think?
I think we'll probably have to be, with all that's gone on there.
Yeah. But there were actually, you know what? There were haunted tours. There's a bus that did like haunted tours in Edinburgh. I'm really positive, because I wanted to get on it.
You did. You did want to get on it. I think I talked you into doing Mary King's Close instead of doing the haunted bus tour.
Yes, that's right. I'm so glad. It was really well done. I mean, hands down, one of the best tours that we've been on in all the places that we've been to.
Yeah, and something that we didn't know about until we got to the city, and we're like kind of researching what we wanted to do, and we wanted to learn more about these closes and what it was and what it meant, and something more like off the beaten path history wise, and this like was such a good find.
Yeah, it took the cake. Yeah. And then after that, we did another really Scottish thing.
Yes. Well, after all of that, we definitely needed a drink. And so we found a place called the Devil's Advocate. And so this is in Advocates Close. And so closes were either named after people, like a famous person like Mary King, or what would go on there. And so Advocates Close is where all the lawyers were, or advocates. And they now have a bar on that street that they call the Devil's Advocate. And you can go there. They have so many different kinds of scotch. It'll make your head spin. And it's a really cool kind of vibey place. We stood at the bar and had a scotch tasting. The bartender was super cool and walked us through scotch. Like, I know a little bit about whiskey, but don't know much about scotch. And so he was really great to kind of tell us, like, here's what makes this different. And when you taste this, think about this. And really sort of walked us through piece by piece for a Scotch tasting, and you're in Scotland, so you got to have some Scotch whiskey, right? And we had then some cocktails after we had the tasting, and you actually ordered, or I think, did we just split? I think maybe we just shared an old fashioned. But the old fashioned, we got it made with Scotch, which made it really different. If you like old fashions, but you like the peaty or smoky taste of Scotch, having an old fashioned made with Scotch was actually really good.
Yeah. Wasn't it a certain kind of Scotch too? Not all Scotches have that smoky taste, but we've figured out, like, I was like, oh, I really like that smokiness. And then, like, we figured out that, like, you would do an old fashioned that way, and we're like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I think we, like, in the tastings, I think you picked, like, one of your favorites, or I think it was one that you really liked, and he was like, well, this one, if you like this, you'll really like this one, and it's close, and he made a good recommendation for us.
Yeah. He did a really good job. Like, that was really well done, and that was such another moment in time where I just remember sitting there with you at the bar, and this place has, like, really, it's kind of like, it's literally in an alleyway. Like, you would have to, like, work really hard to find it. And we just happened to come across it. And you walk inside, and it's got really high ceilings. And then up at the very top are some windows where natural light is coming in. Yeah. And the sun was starting to set, and, like, the sun was coming in and shining. And it was kind of like evening, but at the same time, it just had, like, this nice soft light. And I was just like, man, this is, like, what a great day. And I was, like, high off of the tour because I was just like, my mind was blown by all the information they shared. And we just got to, like, sit around and talk about it and then learn about Scotch. And I think that sealed the deal for us that day, probably.
Yeah. That day was pretty amazing. I got to go to a castle. You got to go to a really creepy, haunted, like, place in Mary King's Close, and we got to have a drink to end it. Like, that was the perfect day in Scotland for sure. And it was our last day there.
Yeah.
We had to move on, sadly. I did not want to go. Edinburgh was my favorite place. And it just left me wanting more. I immediately started plotting, how am I going to go back and make it back? And we want to know, what places have you been to that you feel that way?
Yeah.
Where have you been that has just left you wanting more, and you just said, I have to get back here as soon as possible? We want to know them because we want to go there and steal them from you, or go there with you and have you show them to us. But you can get in touch with us and let us know on social media. You can find us in all the places. We would be so excited to hear from you.
That's right, guys. Thanks for liking and reviewing both the videos and the podcast. You're listening to the podcast right now, but those videos are out there on YouTube, and they really help bring these stories to life. So if you want to see what we're talking about, go out on YouTube and find the video on Edinburgh, and make sure that you are subscribed both on YouTube and here wherever you're listening to podcasts, because we are headed to Dublin next. We're actually traveling by plane now. We are headed to an airport in Edinburgh, and we are going to hop on a plane and go to another country. New country, super fun. And, I will admit, though, things got off to a little bit of a rocky start in Dublin. But you'll have to tune in to find out.
Yeah. Did we have the luck of the Irish or not? Come back next time.
Okay, you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Life is short.
Wonder well.